Greetings, fellow RotoBallers. Welcome back. It is Week 16. It is the Checkdown. My name is Joey Christopoulos with my host, David Rispoli, the show that gives you our quarterback and tight end start sits for hopefully the final four of your fantasy playoffs, as long as Tom Brady didn't completely Grinch your roster last week. Dave, how are you, man? Let's dive right into it.
Joey, holy smokes. That was a weird week. If you somehow manage to get through last week and win and move in the playoffs, just give yourself a pat on the old back because it was historically bad. It has been like 30 plus years since so few touchdowns were scored. I'm the Teddy guy. You know I love Teddies, Joey. It was a wild week. Didn't get a lot of what I love. So let's try and give the people some options this week. These are all going to be people that are outside of the top 10 or 12 that we feel might sneak their way back in for week 16.
And Dave, just really quick, we do have to do this because the NFL season, as long as many sports, are getting pretty crazy right now. We are taping this on Tuesday at 2:30 Pacific time. So, in theory, right now, we have not seen the two Tuesday games yet be played while we're making our picks right now. And let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of different issues right now with health and protocols the rest of the week. So let's just keep that in mind as we dive into our quarterback starts for week 16. Dave, who's your first start of the week?
Good old Christmas COVID coming in strong. Okay.
Disclaimer, baby.
Here's my start of the week. It's Joe Burrow. He was a sit last week. We were right. And he's a start this week. Why? Baltimore. And since coming off their bye week, Joe Burrow has thrown at least one touchdown in every single game. And now he gets the Baltimore Ravens, giving up at least two touchdowns every game in their two touchdowns in their last four games. And they've been an absolute smash matchup for opposing quarterbacks all year. Burrow, back in the top 12, baby. Who you got, Joe?
Love that pick. And here we go, guys. A little bit of a contrarian pick. This guy obviously has a lot of name recognition, but hasn't played that great as of recently. I'm going Dak Prescott versus the Washington football team. He is the number 12 quarterback in fantasy right now. And Dave, I know by that face, and a lot of people watching right now, what are you saying? He's averaging 7-1 points a game his last three games, and also he just played WFT a couple weeks ago and only put up 211, a touch, and two interceptions against them. But here's what I'm saying, Dave. This is a gut call, baby, and I think that he gets into the top 10 easily this year. First of all, let's go back to that game against WFT, against the football team. It was a weird game. Interception, fumble, touchdown for Dallas. Dallas got up 24-0 in that game. You didn't really have to pass the ball a whole lot till the very end when they crawled back into it. I get it, Dak didn't play that great. But also, here's my final stat. Again, Washington football team allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year, so that's already a favorable matchup. Multiple touchdowns in 3 of their last 5. And here it is. Dak Prescott, 6 games at home this year. 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 271 passing yards a game. On the road this year, 9 touchdowns, only to 8 interceptions. It's a home road split, baby. This is what I'm going with right here. Dak at home versus WFT with a favorable matchup. I think he gets back in the good graces, 20-plus fantasy points. I'm calling it right now. That's my start this week, Dave. We got to move over. Let's get our tight ends. Start tight end for week 16. This is an important one. Travis Kelce's out. We got a lot of decisions to make, a lot of fantasy managers freaking out. Dave, who you got?
Yeah, welcome to the Checkdown Starts. It's Zach Ertz, baby. Yeah, old guys. In his first game without DeAndre Hopkins, he got targeted 11 times. Love to see that. And I don't think this is a fluke because he has 7 or more targets in 3 out of his last 4 games. Now, he's yet to find the end zone since coming off their bye, but Indy may be just what the doctor ordered because they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends and giving up 2 tutties to Hunter Henry just last week, and Gronk put up 123 receiving yards on them. I look for a big game from Zach Ertz. Colts have a great D, but their weakness is absolutely tight ends and chocolate. You know?
Well, and that's what's going to happen, right? We're going to get to quarterback sits in a little bit, but without DeAndre Hopkins, you're going to need a safety valve there in that offense to be able to move the chain. So I like that call a whole lot. Dave, for my tight end start this week, again, getting a little crazy on this one. You have no Travis Kelce. What are you going to do? You got to scour the waiver wire right now. You got to find somebody. You're saying to yourself, sure, CJ Uzomah, who we talked about with Burrow. He's 15th right now among tight ends. He's got a good matchup. I don't mind that. Noah Fant, 18th overall. But again, who's the quarterback for the Denver Broncos? Mike Gesicki. He's getting the targets, but is he getting the air yards? So I'm just going to throw it out there. We've had him on the check down before. I'm going to throw out my boy Cole Kmet versus Seattle. and here is why. He's the 26th tight end in fantasy this season, so there are other options. But guess what? I guarantee you, he will be free. He's averaging 6.75 targets over his last 8 games, 8.25 over his last 4. You can match that up with anybody else in the top 12 right now, and that number is the same. Seattle gives up the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. The only reason why Cole Kmet isn't higher is he doesn't have a touchdown this year. I think that can change this week against the Seattle defense that has allowed 6 touchdowns to tight ends over their last 4 games, and 9 tight ends this season have at least 8+ fantasy points against them. If you're in a pinch, there's a lot of great options out there. Leave your comments and questions in below, but I think Cole Kmet in a pinch can get you those 8 to 11 fantasy points. So I'm putting him on there as a start, Dave. Time to flip back over. Quarterback sits. Who's got you scared? Who's got you frightened? Or who may disappoint in Week 16?
Yeah, I think it's time to talk about Taysom Hill, folks. Okay. Start Taysom, they said, right? He has a high floor, they said, Joey. Okay, well, we
Look at his finger, they said.
we found Taysom's weakness. And guess what? It's throwing the ball. And that's pretty important as a quarterback. Now, we saw what happens to Taysom when he faces a good run defense like the Bucks. They basically zapped all of his fantasy value. And now you might be seeing the Dolphins matchup and you might be saying, okay, yeah, they're kind of like middle of the pack versus opposing quarterbacks. But Miami is 7th toughest for opposing running backs. So they're very tough on the ground. Again, this is setting up very similar to the Bucks defense. This is a bad matchup for Taysom Hill, who gets a majority of his fantasy value from his legs. And if you cut back to 2 weeks ago, he would have had a very different fantasy stat line if he didn't just randomly break off a 67-yard tutty when they totally didn't need to do that. All I'm saying is, in a week leading up to the fantasy championship, do you really want to hitch your wagon to the arm of Taysom Hill?
The finger, the arm. I'm going to go probably with no. I mean, he's had some solid moments, but I think he definitely could disappoint this week. My next one is, it's going to sound a little counterintuitive to your Zach Ertz start, but I actually think both things can kind of happen. I'm going for a sit. I'm going Kyler Murray versus the Indianapolis Colts. And look,
Spicy.
I know. And here's the deal. He's missed some time. He's still in the top 10. Kyler Murray's points per game has been fantastic this year. I think it's over 23 a game. But since he's come back from injury, it's just not the same. And since he lost DeAndre Hopkins, it is definitely not the same. And he's going up against a Colts defense that's allowing only 11.7 fantasy points to quarterbacks over their last 6 games, only 173 passing yards during that span, and only 6 touchdowns allowed. Here's the other one that kind of scares me, Dave. They've played some running quarterbacks, right? The Colts have played the Josh Allens of the world. They haven't allowed more than 33 rushing yards to a quarterback since week 5 and 0 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks all season long. On top of that, allowing only the 5th fewest points to fantasy running backs this year. This scares me, Dave. Now, he can, use Zach Ertz to move the chains. I like that a whole lot, even in half PPR, full PPR. Zach Ertz can put up a good number, but Murray's only 3-3, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions since returning. It's just not looking that great. And there's a guy on the other side of the football that the Cardinals are going to have to try and stop. What is his name? Jonathan Taylor. Oh, yeah, that's right. So I'm a little confused about what's going to happen with Kyler Murray and some of the things, the intangibles, the rushing yards that he brings that makes him such a great fantasy asset. I think those can be suppressed, and I think he might disappoint in Week 16.
Yeah, I love the call, Joey. I don't mind sitting Kyler Murray this time around because all of the fantasy teams I have Kyler Murray on got eliminated from the playoffs because I played Kyler Murray.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm
going to give you my tight end sit. And this is a guy that's absolutely been a stud, a super solid pickup. But this week, I just don't like the way this is setting up, especially in a do or die week in the playoffs. Dawson Knox versus New England. Okay. Broken record here. Here's another tight end that's become very touchdown dependent. But let's explore that. Over his last 4 games, he's only topped 38 receiving yards once. And in his last game versus New England, he was held to just 2 catches for 14 yards. New England hasn't given up a touchdown to a tight end since week 10. And before that, it was 4 weeks before that. They are very, very good in the red zone versus opposing tight ends. Therefore, I don't like the way this sets up at all. If I was ranking, I would have Dawson Knox probably outside my top 10 or 12.
Dave, I'm sticking on the same side of the same field for you, same game. I'm going Hunter Henry versus Buffalo. And look, he's on my fantasy team that just so happens to be very much alive in the fantasy playoffs right now, and I want him to do well. But again, we're talking about another touchdown-dependent option. He blew up last week for 677 and 2 touchdowns. Look, if you watch that game, though, they were down 20-0 in the second half. They really had to come from behind and change the way that they played offense. If the Patriots want to win this game at home versus Buffalo, it's not going to be a 46 run to 3 pass ratio. It's also not going to be Mac Jones throwing the ball like crazy in the second half like he did last week. There's going to have to be a balance there, and I think they do it through running the football. Against Buffalo, Buffalo's allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points to tight ends this year. Only one touchdown to the tight end position since week 6. And look, Mac Jones has good home splits, 102.5 quarterback rating at home. I'm just kind of thinking if they have a formula to win, and now this is a must-win for both sides of the football right now, I don't think the Patriots are going to lean towards Mac Jones doing it with the ball in his hands as much as it is hopefully getting Damian Harris back and running the football with him and Stevenson. So I think Henry might be held out of the end zone. If he's held out of the end zone, it's going to be a sit. It's going to be a bust. That's why I'm going with Hunter Henry as a sit.
Joey, great calls. And I want to know in the comments this time around, if you're still in the playoffs, and if you're not, put down the name of the Grinch that stole your fantasy Christmas away from you. Let me know who the fantasy Grinch is on your team who totally blew it. Ramondre Stevenson.
A 44-year-old handsome man who's gotten you so far and then completely just destroyed your playoff hopes the same way he might blow up everyone else's NFL hopes when he maybe wins the Super Bowl at the end of the year. We'll see what happens. This was week 16. This was the check down. Welcome to the Fantasy Final Four playoffs. Hopefully you made it. Hopefully we helped you out right here on this video. Joey Christopoulos at Joey Sports Guy. David Spoli at Tutty Guy. Thanks so much for checking out this vid. Happy holidays. See you next week.
Happy holidays, guys.